Good morning. My name is Stacey Croft. I'm one of the pastors here, and I'm thankful I get to speak to you from the scriptures. And if you're new to the Bible or new to church, we believe that the Bible is actually God speaking to us. We open it up. It's an ancient book. We're actually going to even look at a very ancient book called Proverbs that we're going through this summer. And this is our kind of second installment of that series. And we want you to really think about the fact that we're looking at a book that's been around for centuries, and yet the Lord continues to school us in it, to reveal himself, and to grow us and make us more like himself in Christ. He has revealed himself in Jesus, and he has shown it, and this is a timeless book for us. So I'm very thankful to look at it. You know, I actually grew up in Texas. My wife and I both did. She's from Houston. I'm from Dallas. We went to Baylor, and I had the privilege of getting to walk on the track team there. Enjoyed that. It was fun. Had great experiences. It was a walk-on. You know, you earn your keep, and so I had a good time doing that. The timing of when I got to walk on and did was pretty cool because I got to run in 1996 with someone who was training, this guy named Michael Johnson. And perhaps you've heard his name. He was not a student at the time. He had come back because our coach was one of the Olympic coaches. He still has coached for years. And so Michael would come and train with us. Well, every Monday, we had these things called Infinite 200s. Yes, Infinite 200. So we would run, they would put cones around the track, about 8 cones, and they would put a buzzer sound for the women and a buzzer sound for the men, which makes us sound like animals, right? And you would run, and you would need to keep pace on that. So every time the buzzer hit you. So because I was kind of an outlier, I was a walk-on, I was doing decathlon walk-on, I was just thrown in the mix, so they put me with Michael and the Olympic trainees. So there I am, running with these guys, and a couple of the other Olympians were in another relay group, so you're stuck in a group so you could run. Well, there I am handing the baton off to Michael, and every, however many teen 200s, and I'm gassed, and he's like flying. Well, I remember we're going, and of course, I'm the one that's probably keeping us behind the buzzer pace. I hand off to him, and he just goes. And if you don't know who that is, Olympian, world record, Olympic record holder, gold shoes, may have heard of this. You gotta look him up. He's an amazing runner. But the guy next to me in the team was also an Olympic runner, and he was running, and because Michael was just so fast, by the time Michael was around the curve, this guy decided, I'm not gonna do that. He jumped the track, ran across the field to catch him, and then jump on pace again, just to be with him. And this is another Olympian, mind you. When I moved here, and one of the things that John, it's been decades since we've lived here, and one of the things that John Trapp, our senior pastor, reminded me of and made a comment about was the hum around Houston. And that hum is the things like I-10 or the traffic. And you just step outside and you hear this and you're reminded that there's a pace in the city. And you don't have to think too hard about it because every one of us feels that kind of like we're behind. And we're all wanting something to give us efficiency in our jobs, in the way we raise our children. Where should we buy a home? How do we move forward in our company? How do we have economic success? How do we have internal encouragement? We ask these questions and we feel constantly as we hear that hum that we're just behind. What is going to catch us up? And we are always seeking that. We're looking at an ancient book, I said, in Proverbs, and it's a book that when we come to it, you can expect Proverbs to just give you the answer right away. Wisdom, right? It's all about wisdom. And for many of us, wisdom may be that thing. It's like, it's going to answer that question. It's going to make me more efficient. It's going to give me better life. But actually, what the scriptures talk about and how we are to grow is not in product, but in process. It's not wisdom as to help you be more efficient or just be better at life, but to grow deeper as a person. Because what's really going to change you isn't keeping up. It's not making sure everything's in line. It's not the great balance that all of us are seeking. That is a myth. What wisdom is telling us is that how do we live this life that's not a sprint but a path that we're to walk down? In fact, I love how Tim Keller said it. Tim Keller is a pastor from New York City. He passed away a handful of years ago. When he talked about what wisdom is, he said, wisdom is competence in regard to the complex realities of life. Don't you want that? Competence in regard to what really is the complex realities of life that are not yes, no, black, white questions that we answer. It's not easy. It's a path, it's a process in how we grow. So we're going to look at 2 chapters, and Proverbs is broken up, and as we're doing this summer, it's broken up in a lot of ways. So we're looking at it more thematically. And today we're going to look at how do we train in wisdom. And we're going to look at how we train in 2 ways. One is wisdom is a path, and also wisdom is a relationship. Wisdom is path, and wisdom as relationship. And we're going to read from chapters 3 and 4 together. You can find this in the Bibles in front of you, and the pages are in the 590s, I believe. If you look in your bulletin, you can find those pages. Or scroll in your phone and tap, 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 and you can get there. Chapter 3, verse 1 begins this. My son, do not forget my teaching, but let your heart keep my commandments. For length of days and years of life and peace they will add to you. Let not steadfast love and faithfulness forsake you. Bind them around your neck. Write them on the tablet of your heart. So you will find favor and good success in the sight of God and man. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make straight your paths. Proverbs 4, starting in verse 10. Hear, my son, and accept my words, that the years of your life may be many. I have taught you the way of wisdom. I have led you in the paths of uprightness. When you walk, your step will not be hampered, and if you run, you will not stumble. Keep hold of instruction. Do not let go. Guard her, for she is your life. Do not enter the path of the wicked and not walk in the way of evil. Avoid it. Do not go on it. Turn away from it and pass on, for they cannot sleep unless they have done wrong. They are robbed of sleep unless they have made someone stumble. For they eat the bread of wickedness and drink the wine of violence. But the path of the righteous is like the light of dawn, which shines brighter and brighter until full day. The way of the wicked is like deep darkness. They do not know over what they stumble. My son, be attentive to my words. Incline your ear to my sayings. Let them not escape from your sight. Keep them within your heart. For they are life to those who find them and healing to all their flesh. Keep your heart with all vigilance. From it flow the springs of life. Put away from you crooked speech and put devious talk far from you. Let your eyes look directly forward and your gaze be straight before you. Ponder the path of your feet, then all your ways will be sure. Do not swerve to the right or to the left. Turn your foot away from evil. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. You know, as we begin looking at this, and you may have caught the repetitive nature of language here. Wisdom is a path. You see this in 3:6. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make straight your paths. 4:10 through 27 just consistently talks about the wicked and righteous, but what are they talking about? A path. See, this is really important for us to understand as we talk about wisdom, that wisdom is not something you do quickly. Typically, it doesn't say wisdom is a doorway. Wisdom is a path, not a doorway where we would love to have quick, immediate change, something we walk through, something that we can immediately see something happen to us, but it's a path. And what do you do on a path? Step by step. It's slow. You're looking ahead of you. You're looking to where it leads. And you continue down it. It's a long process. It's not something you just get out of it, just efficiency, but it's walking and then running It doesn't deal with shortcuts. Wisdom is not something that is necessarily makes life easier, but clearer and better and more rich and full. Most of us, because we would love to have that burst of growth and change. We'd love to have that, but wisdom says otherwise. If we want to really think about it, it says, hear, my son, and accept my words, that the years of your life may be many. Proverbs 4:10. Notice this, the years. It's played out over a long period of time. Being in the sports world, especially with kids in the sports world and YouTube and those kind of things, it's easy to find training material and to look up things online. It's interesting if you talk to coaches now versus coaches, a decade ago, what you would see online and what you would learn. Because a lot of times when you're watching these videos of people who are great athletes or growing athletes, what you're seeing is you're getting what they're doing, their results, right? You're getting their maybe hitting in the cage, and they're hitting, and you see a couple of their strokes, and they're hitting into the back of the net, and their swing looks great. Maybe you see them traveling from one thing to the next. You see a couple moments where they do workouts. But what we're finding is that what we're seeing is the results of athletic behavior, not necessarily process. You're not watching the million balls that fly up into the top of the net in a foul. Or the extreme exhaustion after doing one set of one of those workouts. See, the process is a part of it. And so what's happened to us, and you don't have to look very far on YouTube to do that, we are people who really desire that. I remember there's a book by a guy on the West Coast, a pastor named Paul Kim, who wrote on digital discipleship in a digital age. And he says it's really easy for us to miss the fact that when Jesus talks about discipleship and growth, what are all the metaphors he goes to? Agricultural. And what are some of the most difficult, frustrating parts of discipleship? The long, cultivating process of growth. If we really want to see change in us, it's not something that happens immediate. It's something that happens over time. It's process. It's not a flash. And there's a lot of emphasis in this passage that about not just the path, but what is the path to do? It's to transform not just your behavior, but your heart. This is really interesting. Hebrew wisdom was paralleled often with Egyptian wisdom. If you think about it, the Israelites were under Egyptian slavery for longer than we are a country. So for years, they were a part of that. Now, as they were a part of that, in Proverbs, you can see some parallels of Egyptian wisdom, if you were to study that, and look at it to Israelite wisdom. Where they begin to divide is how they import into the person. Where Egyptian wisdom focuses more on success, behavioral change, ethic. Where Hebrew wisdom begins to go deeper into the heart, and the heart for a Hebrew wasn't just emotive, it was the whole person. When it says heart, it means your will, it means your thinking, it means your emotions, it means every part of you is being addressed with wisdom. Not just what you see, not just the product, not just the results, but that your heart is actually being changed. And that's where it gets hard for us. Because the path is tough. We want to run down that path. We want it to be a short path. We want to find the way to cut across to get to the place where we can get back on track and find ourselves efficient. And if we do that, maybe we feel okay. But success and behavioral change does not equal growth and wisdom. It doesn't mean that you're a new person. It doesn't mean you're actually changing. And this is why in verses 10 through 27, when Proverbs 4 talks about the wicked and righteous, it expands on that. He says, in verse 11, I have taught you the way of wisdom. I have led you in the paths of uprightness. When you walk, your step will not be hampered. And if you run, you will not stumble. Right? So he's also saying, in verse 13, keep hold of these things, because the understanding isn't that once you get it, you got it. See, the problem is the moment we think we have it is when we've lost it. That's actually foolishness. See, how we actually grow in wisdom is continually knowing that we are fools in need of wisdom. Notice how it goes back over and over. When you walk down this path, do not, and then verse 14, do not enter the path of the wicked. And then again, it pits that in verse 18 against, but the path of the righteous. Wicked and righteous are not just about one decision or one moment in your life. It's a path. It's a life. It's saying, I'm going to choose to make this world revolve around me. If you want a quick definition of what foolishness is, and we'll unpack this a lot more over the next few weeks, foolishness is actually saying this world actually is to be shaped to me. One of my favorite movies, it's definitely a throwback, Ferris Bueller's Day Off. If you haven't seen this, you got to see it. It's hilarious. It's about a guy who decides to skip class and go, and you begin to see that the entire city of Chicago basically revolves around this kid, right? I love that. And I was like, dude, this is like the ultimate dream. If you're like, you're like a high school student, because I would love that. But what you begin to see is that everything revolves around him. Like the water towers say, save Ferris, you know, the parade downtown, he just starts singing and everybody kind of goes around him. Like the whole world like revolves around Ferris. And I remember watching going, that's pretty legit. But that's kind of what this is talking about. It's foolishness is us saying, hey, you know what we really want? We really want everything to revolve around us and tailor it to us because it's all about us. Look, I'm an only child. I am selfish, self-absorbed in my own right? I don't have to prove that to anybody. It's all about me. If you're an only child in here, we can talk later. We can have our own therapy sessions, right? But it always led back to me. What is wisdom? It's saying this world is the Lord's and it revolves around him. And the path of the righteous is unique and different because the wicked, notice, it gets darker and darker in this language. Avoid it, do not go on it, but turn away and pass on it, for they cannot sleep unless they have done wrong. They're robbed of sleep unless they have made someone stumble, for they eat the bread of wickedness, drink the wine of violence. And then it says in verse 19, the way of the wicked is like deep darkness. They do not know what they stumble over in the dark. The righteous path is this, and I love this description in verse 18, but the path of the righteous is like the light of dawn, not just light, but that what? It shines brighter and brighter until full day. You know when you go into a room and you get the dimmer switch and you kind of do it slowly, and you begin to do that and the shapes in the room begin to take a little more shape, and then as the light goes up more, you begin to see textures, you begin to see more outlines, you begin to see details in the walls or in the carpet or in the furniture or in the tables or in the room itself. And as that light reaches full, then you can really take in the whole room. That's just like the dawn when it's dark and that light comes up and you begin to see the light of day. What is it doing? It's showing us the reality of life. I love how one commentator said what wickedness is in opposed to righteousness. He says wicked could really be understood as being deeply confused about relationship and reality. It's not just, wickedness isn't just, oh, this is bad. Wickedness isn't just bad. It's being confused about relationship and reality. What is your relationship and reality around you? What do you think this world is for and about? And what righteousness is, as the light gets brighter, what does it do? It doesn't just tell you, be better, be good. It tells you clear, more and more clear. As you walk in wisdom, what is that light as it grows? It makes things more clear, more real, not easier necessarily, but clearer. You begin to see things for what they really are. You begin to see yourself for who you really are. You get to see relationships around you for what they really are. And the question becomes, as this walks through, as he continues to say, my son, listen to my teaching, listen to my teaching. The question is, are you teachable? Are you and I teachable? Are we willing to listen? Are we willing to not think, as it says in chapter 3, that to not lean on our own understanding as if we have it down, as if it's all about us, but to learn that wisdom drives us away from ourselves, because the light of the Lord makes more sense of this world and who we are, because it's not from us. The light doesn't emanate from you and me. I don't know if you remember this moment in the scriptures, but when the transfiguration happens, it's a moment after Jesus tells his disciples who he is. He takes a few of his disciples up and he transfigures before them. This means he shows a bit, like a tad of his glory. And when it describes his transfiguration before them in the Greek, it's talking about the light that's from him is not something that's reflective. It's actually emanating from Jesus himself. So there's actually only one in which the light has come brighter from that we look to. There's only one actual source of light. Even in Revelation, which was quoted earlier on our film about Germany, in the last days, what will be our light of the city is actually the Lord himself. It's described. Why is that? Because what the sun isn't even powerful enough than our God in showing us how full our life will be. That's where we're heading. You want to know where the path is heading? That's where we're heading. But how do we do that now? We do that and we do that through relationship. That path leads us in, and not just a walking in objectively, but in relationship. And it leads us in 4 areas that I want to walk through in this passage. The first one is our relationship to the Lord. And you're like, well, duh. Yeah, isn't that why we're here? Yeah, but the relationship to the Lord. This is really different, okay, in the way that we would think. And I think the way that Proverbs tells us this, it's interesting, because in Proverbs 3:3, it says, 2 says, for the length of days and years of your life and peace, they will add to you, okay? Wisdom. Then he goes into this, let not steadfast love and faithfulness forsake you. Bind them around your neck, write them on the tablet of your heart. Okay, when he's using language of binding and writing, he's using language from earlier in the Old Testament where they would take these little things, you can read it in Deuteronomy, they'd take these small boxes and they would place the law, the 10 Commandments, inside of that box, and some would bind it around their heads, some around their neck, so it was always in the forefront, always the thing before them. So you could kind of expect maybe if the words binding here were used to be said, okay, I'm gonna use the law. So do better in the law. The length of days and years, hey, just get really acquainted with the 10 Commandments and you got this down. But he uses completely different language than you would expect. He says, let not steadfast love and faithfulness. How do you measure that? See, steadfast love and faithfulness, he doesn't say fruitfulness, he says faithfulness. He's using characteristics of God, not measurements of what we can accomplish. And this is why in the New Testament, when Jesus really rebukes the Pharisees in so many ways, Matthew 12 is one of those where he reinforces, what is wisdom? What are you Pharisees really seeking? Because what y'all seek is relationship to the law. You have faith in your faith. You have faith in how well you're handling your relationship with God rather than in your relationship with God. What is steadfast love? Steadfast love is long love, steadfast, something that lasts forever. It's something that you would have to do on a path, something long enduring. It's hesed. It's where we get this Hebrew word called hesed, that's mercy, that's long standing. It's God's covenant faithfulness. It's his character. And faithfulness is not fruitfulness. It's something looking through the object of to the relationship you have with God. There was a guy named Horatio Bonner. It's a great name, isn't it? If you're going to study a theologian, a guy named Horatio, you kind of think he's going to have some good quotes, right? He wrote a great book called God's Way of Peace. It's a small book, and what he really gets at in this book is very convicting, because he takes one thing about faith and he says, this is how we get it wrong about faith itself. Listen to what he says. I'm just taking a quick little snippet from it. He says, for you are looking, in terms of our faith, not at the object of our faith, at Jesus, but at your faith. You would draw your comfort not from him, but from your faith. And because your faith is not quite perfect, you are as much discouraged as if Jesus is not quite a perfect Savior. This is making a Jesus of it. In other words, this is making Jesus of your faith. You get it? So in other words, it's easy for us to look at how we're doing in our relationship with God or how our life is going rather than looking to God in relationship or how we feel about him or how things are balanced in our life. Or are we a part of a small group? Are we in church? Are we doing these things that we say, oh yes, this is faith, but it's not. Faith is something you look through to the relationship of. He finishes by saying this. He says, this is making Jesus of it, and in effect, taking the crown of crowns from Jesus' head and placing it upon the head of your faith. See, it's very easy for us in wisdom and foolishness to take those crowns and put them upon our own faith and make our faith what we worship rather than Jesus himself. This is why so many people in the New Testament are talking about faith with Jesus, and he's trying to encourage them over and over. Oh, ye of little faith. He's not talking about they need to have bigger faith. He's saying, you need to see me more in your faith. Relate to me, not your faith. He also talks about here and what wisdom is with ourselves. How do we relate to ourselves? What does that mean? Chapter 4, verses 23 to 27 talks about this. It says, keep your heart with all vigilance, for from it flow the springs of life. And then he talks about speech in 24. He talks about our eyes in 25. He talks about our feet in 26. He talks about how are we relating to ourselves. One of the most vulnerable questions you can have someone answer for you, or you can ask of someone, a spouse, a really close friend, someone that knows you, is to say, how do you experience me? And I guarantee you, not many of us have asked that question lately. And if you have, I'd be curious how you've really handled it. Because that is a very vulnerable question. What am I like to you? What do you experience from me? What does it mean for you to encounter me? Because what we get back in that mirror is often not what we want to hear. Proverbs is doing that. Proverbs is wisdom that's making you ask that question. It's making you ask the question, how am I a fool? Rather than thinking, how wise am I? It's making you say, how am I missing this in my speech, in my eyes, in my feet? Notice, he's saying, put away from you crooked speech. He's saying, what is your speech like? Where are your eyes going? Where are your feet headed? How do you know how to live in wisdom? I remember I was listening to this interview with Diane Sawyer some time ago, and she was a major news anchor who used to do these major interviews with dictators and and people who are of great notoriety. And she was kind of at the end of her career, and I thought it was kind of interesting just listening to her talk about her career, and they were celebrating her. And they asked her, said, what was the most fascinating, or interesting interview you've ever done? And she said, Saddam Hussein. She said, and they were like, oh, okay, why? She said, well, I sat with him, and as I began to talk to him in the height of, his reign and rule, and I was interviewing just based on, his, dictatorship and what he believed. And every time there was a moment of kind of disagreement about American culture, about what he thought about women, or what we thought about our world here, and I would push back on him, he would sit back, and then someone would come off set and whisper in his ear and then leave. And she was constantly going, why does this person keep doing this? Well, after the interview, she realized that this person was coming in to tell him and remind him that he was correct. And she said one of the most interesting things was that she learned what it's like to be a dictator, that your world is completely curved in on itself. That you think and you live in the echo chamber, whether it's on the internet or with people or other ways that tell you that you have it all right. The scriptures and following Jesus don't do that. Wisdom does not let us do that. It does not let us do that in our relationship to ourselves or especially to one another. As it says in verse 4, so you will find favor and good success in the sight of God and man. How do you have favor? How do you have this relationship with not just the Lord, with ourselves, but with those around us? We typically think of the word favor as something where favor is like we're likable. I want to be the most liked. It's like some high school superlative that we live out in Christianity, as if we're to be the most liked person or most liked people. That's actually not it at all. Favor in the Bible in Hebrew is talking about what kind of reconciler are you? How do you restore and reconcile relationships to the Lord and others? That's actually what favor is talking about. And what does it look like for us to do that? Here's what's incredible. In Luke chapter 2, at the very beginning of his life, Jesus, it says, increased in wisdom and stature and in favor with God and man. Jesus did. Why did Jesus do that? And how did he do that? Because there's actually only been one who's done the true work of restoration and reconciliation. Jesus had to take on as wisdom in flesh. This is God's infinite wisdom to love us this well, that he would send his son as wisdom to come in and to take on, to learn and grow in that, in favor with God and man, so that we might be having his favor. That we might be reconciled with him. That we might have restoration with him. Because there's only been one who's been able to do it, who ultimately restored us in perfect wisdom. That is in Christ. That means when we enter into our time together at this table, and you're about to taste this, you're about to taste wisdom on a whole different level. This table behind me represents so much. It represents the fact that this body and blood that over centuries people looked at as crazy and foolishness. Do you realize that Paul told us wisely, he said, Jesus became foolishness, and the cross is foolishness so that we as fools might be made wise. Think about the foolishness of coming and eating body and blood. What do we do that for? What in the world would that provide for us? How would that grow us? Make us new, make us different? Well, in his infinite wisdom, he's taken fools, brought us here, and guess what do we train in? Why do you come? What is training? It's something you come to it repetitively. You come to this table regularly. Because it's not enough to come here once. You have to come over and over and receive the work of God and his wisdom to make you and form you more like his son Jesus. So that you may be changed and grow, not in some crazy quick moment, but in a path. A long-standing growth. This is why Jesus came and didn't just come for a minute and die. He came, lived in flesh, died and rose again, and even lived beyond that, because his life still, even now as ascended, is engaged in that process for us to become more and more like him. Amen?